TX Factor is brought to you in association with Martin Lynch & Sons, the world's favourite ham store. And the Radio Society of Great Britain is proud to sponsor TX Factor. Hello and welcome to the Christmas 2018 edition of TX Factor, episode 22. In this show, we report from this year's RSGB Convention, we explore the rise in popularity of network radio, and have an in-depth review of the new Icom IC-R6800 general coverage SDR receiver, plus an exciting Christmas bundle of goodies in our free-to-enter draw. To kick us off, the first of our visits to the RSGB Convention with our roving reporter, Pete Sipple.
The RSGB Convention is an annual event hosting a range of lectures, a build-a-thon, construction challenges and special interest groups. I went along to get a flavour of this year's event at the Kents Hill Convention Centre in Milton Keynes, where I met the convention chairman, Graham Shirville.
We hold the convention on an annual basis. We've had it here at Kents Hill for the last 3 or 4 years. We last year had something like 650 people through the door, and judging by today's attendance, we've got to wait and see how many come tomorrow. It looks as though it's going to be very similar again this year.
What sort of things can amateurs expect if they come to the convention?
Another interesting development over the last year, the number of special interest groups who've asked to exhibit this year has gone up by about 50% over last year. So it's beginning to get a bit crowded in the special interest group room, but it's interesting because it coincides with the RSGB board looking to appoint a special interest group officer to look after that group of people rather than the more traditional clubs that many of us know. We have 53 different talks in 5 different streams. We've got speakers from 6 countries outside the UK. We've got everything from beginners talks through to highly technical talks aimed purely at experts. So it's right across the spectrum. We have a build-a-thon this year which is being done in a different way. We're doing it on a Saturday evening so that people can take the evening to do it, and at the same time they can have a meal whilst they're working. So they can work through the night if they really want to.
It's a great addition to this year's event.
Indeed it is. We've also of course got the construction competition, which seems to go from strength to strength. A lot of people say people never build anything any longer. Well, that's not true. And again this year we've got people taking all 3 levels of the exams today and tomorrow, and of course people can take the US exams here as well, which is we always have a number of people that do that.
Quite a few lectures going on here today. Any key names people should be looking out for?
Well, of course we're delighted that this year we've got Tim Duffy, K3LR, who owns or runs the contest station in the world in many people's eyes. And also we've got Don Greenbaum, who was one of the leaders of the Baker Island expedition, and we know so many people were waiting to work Baker Island as one of the countries that they haven't got. So for those of you watching, come along next year, 11th, 12th and 13th of October 2019.
That was Graham Shirville. And I'll be back later in the programme with more interviews and features from the RSGB Convention 2018. But next, here's Bob Mccreadie with news of a somewhat controversial mode.
As you know, on TX Factor we like to bring you the news of the latest big things in amateur radio, and when we want to know what's happening in the world of amateur radio, we come along often to talk to Jonathan about these things. And this time, Jonathan, a new thing in amateur radio where people might say, is this actually amateur radio?
Well, yes. So we're talking network radios, which I like to think of a mobile phone masquerading in a radio's body. It looks and feels like a radio, but there's no RF stage as such.
So we've got one here. This
Yes.
is a mobile version.
So this is the Enrico TM8, and it's essentially, I like to think of it as a mobile phone, but masquerading in a radio's body. It looks and feels like a radio, but is using either the GSM networks or indeed Wi-Fi.
So we've got no 77s or 2-meter RF stage
No.
in this. Instead, we've got a SIM card.
Yes, so a SIM card of any particular mobile network that you fancy, or indeed if you're using it in the shack, you can connect it up to your Wi-Fi network. It's running Android, which is an operating system that many people feel very comfortable with. You may have an Android phone sat in your pocket, and we're using Android apps that have been developed that will accept a PTT input and that will enable us to communicate with other amateurs and potentially non-licensed people as well, all over the world.
The apps that this runs are apps that have been around for a while, though, on phones and tablets and so on.
Exactly. So we're using, there's three main that people are using. So the first one is Zello, which is been around for a few years now, and enables us to use a PTT input. There's also TeamSpeak, which through the International Radio Network channel enables amateurs to communicate all over the world. And then there's also the likes of Echolink, which have recently updated their app to enable that PTT input.
So we could be accessing Echolink, for example, through this, which would mean that we could still be talking to somebody who's accessing a normal repeater.
Absolutely. So you connect in the same way you can on your phone, connect the radio up to a repeater, and off it goes. And in fact, even with the TeamSpeak app with the International Radio Network, there are links and bridges across onto traditional amateur radio systems.
Presumably, though, there are places where non-amateurs can get on and have a bit of a practice. So I was talking earlier on to Ian Abel, and we will try and get hold of him via this magical system shortly. And he's founded a particular room, hasn't he, on Zello?
So yes, Ian has been one of the brains behind the Network Radios group on Zello. And what part of their ethos is that you don't necessarily have to be licensed in order to use it, but you do have to show an interest in amateur radio. So there's a few unlicensed people in there that are trying it out and seeing if the hobby's for them before they go out and get their foundation license.
And it's moderated, so if they don't play by the rules, they can't be in that room. And the rules are that it works as if they were amateur radio contacts.
Correct, absolutely.
So it could be argued then that that would be a training ground for would-be amateurs, because I do know that one of the things that happens, a lot of foundation licensees get their licenses and then don't operate because they've got to jump that hurdle of having the QSO, which is all a bit scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the perfect proving ground, and it is the toe in the water of, is this hobby for me? And you can easily have a QSO on the Zello network without actually having to touch any nasty RF stuff.
Right, so I think you've also got a handheld portable version.
Yeah, so this is the Enrico T320 made by the same company. It's the handheld version of the mobile, again running Android, so it feels very much like a mobile phone when you're using it, but it has the look and the feel of a very rugged amateur radio set. So at the moment we're in the Zello app. We're currently connected up to the Network Radio's channel.
So I wonder if Ian is there monitoring us.
Well, do you want to give it a go?
Okay, I forgot what his call sign is. G3...
ZHI.
G3ZHI. This is Golf Zero Foxtrot Golf X-Ray Portable, calling it.
Good afternoon to you, Bob. G7BHE, Paul in Essex here. Hope all is well with you. And welcome to Network Radios. I don't think I've heard you on here before. Back to you.
Yeah, Roger. Well, I was waiting for a repeater bleep that didn't come there. Yes, we're here at Martin Lynch & Sons, just finding out about network radio for the first time with Jonathan, and we were hoping to speak to Ian Abel, who I know is the man behind the room we're talking in at the moment, but we didn't hear him. But you came back to us. So why are you using network radio?
G7BHE returning. I'm a big fan of it, actually, Bob. It's incredibly easy to use, user-friendly. And I mean, for those that aren't using specific network radios, you can use it on a telephone, which for those who are slightly more image conscious might be an issue. So I tend to find that the audio quality is excellent. The people on here are incredibly friendly, and it's run very well. There's a moderation team, and you don't get the sort of jamming that you would get on repeaters, for instance. And whilst it might not be traditional radio for a lot of people, it's incredibly good fun. and it serves its purpose. It's very much an adjunct or a bolt-on to amateur radio, and those of us here thoroughly enjoy it. G0FGX, G7BHE.
Still waiting for that K from the repeater. G0, you see, I am a traditionalist. G0FGX. Well, thank you very much indeed, Paul. Our best wishes to you in Essex from us here in Staines, and thanks for giving us your views on network radio.
Yeah, 7-3s to you, Bob. Take care, and say hello to everybody at Martin Lynch from me. G7BHE, back to standby.
There we are then, that's a new thing for me, my first ever network radio QSO. It was very interesting actually, the audio quality was great, and I can understand the argument for this being a training ground for people who can have their first QSOs this way, for people who just want to chat, and there are plenty of those, and maybe get people who aren't amateurs interested in amateur radio and move them on to the next stage. And I suppose really, Jonathan, the thing is, as Paul said when we were talking to him, it's a bolt-on, it's an add-on. It doesn't stop anyone else doing any of the things they like in amateur radio. So, you know, it's something different to maybe give a try to. Jonathan, thanks for telling us about it.
Thanks very much, Bob.
And if you'd like to find out more about network radio, of course, the information is all in the show notes.
Still to come on TX Factor are free-to-enter draw and more from the RSGB Convention, including a sneak preview of Yaesu's new transceiver, the FTdx 101MP.
Now on TX Factor, we get an opportunity to test drive the Icom R8600. Now, we have met this radio before, because you might remember when we were at the Newark Hamfest last year, we met it for the first time on the Icom stand, but I don't think it was generally available then, so we've had to wait a bit to get our hands on it to give it a proper test drive. And of course it is now available in a ham store near you. So what can it do? Well, you'll notice we've got it perched on top of the IC-7300. And it's similar, it's a slightly smaller footprint than its cousin here. And of course the big difference is it's only a receiver, it's not a transceiver. But when you come to drive it, if you've used a 7300, you will find your way around quite a lot of the operation of this radio, because there is quite a similarity. For a start, it's an SDR in a box. So we've got all the knobs and switches, which have proved so popular with the 7300 that people like a radio that looks like a radio but has all the advantages of an SDR. And you can computer control this by connecting it up to some optional remote control software. I should point out though, it's not the same remote control software as the 7300. So if you've got that already, it's not going to work with this. So what is so special about this radio? Well, for a start, it is a receiver that goes from 10 kilohertz to 3 gigahertz. So that is quite a range. And it's, I think, fair to say, a superior SDR to the one in the 7300. So why is this such a special SDR receiver? Well, it is based on FPGA technology, so that's Field Programmable Gate Array, which is not easy to say. And that means that is doing most of the demodulation, the signal processing, the DSP. And for HF, the signals are sampled directly from HF into the AD converter, but for two different sections of VHF and UHF, so from 30 megahertz up to about 1100 megahertz, then it's down converted to an HF IF, which is then goes to the AD converter. And what that does is that means you get superior aliasing in your SDR and image reception reduction as well. That's what it says in the specs, but what we always want to know as ham radio operators is, how does it perform for us? How does it do the things we want it to do? And boy, can this do a lot, being as it covers from 10 kilohertz to 3 gigahertz. That is quite a range. So this is a good moment to, first of all, have a look at the back of the radio and look at the various connectors. We've got an end connector here for our VHF, UHF and above antennas. We've got another antenna socket here, and you can easily switch on the front panel between the antenna sockets. So this one, standard PL259 connector, so we could connect our HF antenna there. There's an RCA connector for an antenna as well. That's a 500 ohm antenna connection. So you can have a variety of receive antennas hung off the back of it. Then we've got a 10.7 megahertz output here, and we've got a reference, a 10 megahertz in and out reference frequency. IQ out here, which gives us the in-phase quadrature IQ data, comes out of there. Extension speaker, well, does what it says. AF, IF jack, which gives us the demodulated audio signal out, or the 12 kilohertz IF out there. So there's a remote jack here, which will remotely control the receiver using the CIV commands. USB connector, well, that's going to be the easiest way to remote it, is just to connect it straight into a computer via the USB socket here. Or there is, and this is an interesting departure compared to the 7300, because if you wanted to run this with remote software, you had to connect it into a computer that operated as a server to run the whole thing off. This will connect directly into your router or your router, depending on what side of the Atlantic you're on, and then through that LAN port there, you'll get you can use that for automatic time synchronization, and also it outputs the demodulated audio signal, or again the 12 kilohertz IF signal to the network, and also all the remote control using the software, which is different to the 7300 software. It's not the same, so you're going to have to order some special remote control software for this one, but that would enable you to drive the radio from a completely remote location, as we've demonstrated in previous TX Factors with the 7300. So you could be anywhere in the world and still listening to your radio at home, or just be using it on a computer in the same room as you and remote controlling it that way, and perhaps displaying the waterfall up on your computer screen. So a fairly comprehensive set of sockets on the back here. There's a DC in socket here. That's because, if I can heave into view here, whoa, there is an optional speaker and power supply here. And this one, just you have the usual mains lead that plugs in the back there, and then you can plug this into the external speaker socket, and this one plugs into that DC socket there to provide a mains power supply. We've just got it plugged into the shack power supply, the 12 volt power supply, using the red leads here. And if you are going to use your built-in speaker and power supply, then you take that out, and there is a replacement plug that goes in that socket there that sort of blocks that off, so that it'll all work through the DC input socket there. All right, so what we need to do is connect some aerials to it, turn it round and see what it does. Right, we're powered up and we're running. So as with the 7300, this is an SDR in a box, and we can interact with it through the knobs and switches on the front, but also using this touch screen. So at the moment we're displaying the waterfall here. That's quite a big chunk of spectrum it's showing us there. So a couple of ways we can tune. Here's our big tuning knob here. We can set how coarse or fine we want to tune. If I put a tap over that one, then there we go. And if I want to tune more finely, I can tap on there. Well, that all makes excellent sense. If I want to input a particular frequency we want to jump straight to, if you just touch the frequency display, up comes the keypad here. So if we want to put ourselves in the middle of the 40 meter amateur band, so we can go 7.100, enter, there we are. And let's just turn it up so we can hear some audio coming from it. Now that is quite a chunk of spectrum we're showing there. So one way you can tune a signal, if you see a signal you want to listen to, you can just touch it on the waterfall and then touch it again on the magnified version. As you see, we've jumped all the way up to 9 megs there. So I think if we just want to look at one particular bit of the spectrum, we need to narrow it down a bit. So let's go back to the middle of 40 meters. Bonk. There we go, and we've got the span control here, so if we touch span and then tap minus, we can change the span that we're looking at on the waterfall to something that's a bit more meaningful, giving us a bit more detail about the band that we're on. And the great thing with SDR, as we've said many times before, is not only we can hear the signals, but we can see them here. So we see a signal pop up that looks like we want to give it a listen, and we can tap on it like that. And if we spot something that looks a bit more like a bit of sideband there, and we can fine tune it, of course, with the tuning knob. So there we are. We've got a signal on lower sideband, and we're using the first filter. We have a choice of filters. Let me just turn this down a little bit, and we'll get on to what all these knobs do in a second. So to change the filter width, we can just tap on here, and we've got 3 preset filters, so we can step between those according to what we want. And if we would like to change the width of the filter, if you press the filter and hold it, then this screen comes up, and you can actually then adjust the width, BW. You press that, and then you can adjust the width of the filter by using the main tuning knob here. So you've got quite a lot of control over your filtering, and you've got all that from this display here. There are, of course, a lot of other controls that you're going to want to access on the front here. And here's an interesting thing. If you have a look at the front of the radio, you'll notice there isn't a knob that's labelled volume or a knob that's labelled squelch. And this is because These are called dial A, dial B and dial C, and that's because they're multifunction. And if you just turn that one up and down, at the moment it's doing the AF gain for us. But if I press it in, lo and behold, a bunch of other things turn up, and then we can just tap the one we want to adjust. So by tapping on that, I can now turn the treble up and down on my audio, or the bass, or the RF gain, or the squelch. So if I turn that up, we're going to squelch that signal out. We don't need any squelch in the middle of 40 meters at the moment. And likewise, if we press dial C over here, we've got various other adjustments here that we can make, and the same on dial A. And we can, and it starts to get a bit complicated then, but we can allocate different things to those buttons as well, so that we can set it up how it's convenient to us.
Thanks, Bob. Halfway through, and I already want one. We'll take a break there and return with part 2 of our preview later in the show.
The Radio Society of Great Britain is proud to be a sponsor of TX Factor. The RSGB's Planning Advisory Committee provides advice to members proposing to erect aerial systems which require planning permission. The committee has an updated planning guidance booklet outlining whether planning permission is required and providing guidance on making applications and appeals. The booklet also explains how to deal with unexpected visits from a council enforcement officer. Members can also seek assistance from our advisory panel on any aspect of planning guidance. The volunteer members are radio amateurs with personal knowledge of how the planning system works throughout the United Kingdom. The planning guidance booklet and contact details for the advisory panel can be found on the RSGB website. If you think you have the appropriate background and experience to join the panel, contact the PAC chairman. The RSGB Planning Advisory Committee, helping to keep you on the air.
The RAIBC is an established charity dedicated to supporting amateurs and shortwave listeners with disabilities. And at the convention, I met up with Dean Bryce, G0UIL, to talk about one of his inventions.
Yeah, the box behind me actually is a talking box. You connect it to the CAT port on the back of a transceiver, and it will read the frequency, it will tell you the signal strength, it will change the band, it will change the mode. We can adapt the buttons to do anything that the radio does in a menu. So partially sighted, instead of going into a menu, can control the radio via the box.
So it's making it nice and accessible for those that have got sight issues. I
was asked if there was such a talking box. There wasn't, so I conjured one up. And as far as I know, that's the only talking box being available at the moment. I did actually win the construction competition last year for merit. I quickly put it in and come away with a book. So it did get a bit of fame last year.
Superb, well done. Can we give it a try?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Band up. 14.098.5 USB 1.2 18.346.0 CW.
I'm with Sarah, 2E0ISJ here at the RSGB Convention. How's your day going?
Very interesting. Since last year it's definitely moved forwards. The chat about the 2022 strategy is interesting, meeting the board. That was a fantastic opportunity. Well done to the RSGB for putting themselves in front of everybody, so that was good. And the vibe here is great. It's brilliant.
So people might know you as Sarah from Suffolk Red, is that right?
Yes, they don't really know that I'm actually a member of Felixstowe District Amateur Radio Society. People seem to know me more as the chairman of Suffolk Red. But yes, you're absolutely right. I'm here again. This is my second year running, and it's interesting to hear people's responses to Suffolk Red. I get a lot of questions about what is it we do, what are we all about really, how do we differ from a normal traditional club, how do we differ from a virtual club, you know, what sort of things do we offer. And this morning I think Dom from the Cam Hams actually summed it up. He said it's a fantastic opportunity for people to get together, talk to each other, because a lot of times we talk on the air. and they come along and they get to play radio. So each night we have a different set of demos. Everybody who presents the demo for the evening is aware of the fact they will have to answer questions, and they are quite happy to interact with the people in front of them. And you get to play radio, you get hands-on experience with kit that you may never have seen before. You may have read about it in the new Technical Wireless or Adcom, and then there it is. So it's really a case of meeting people face to face, but at the same time sharing the diversity of amateur radio and what it has to offer.
For those that don't know, what actually is a Suffolk Red event?
Suffolk Red, it's 6 times a year, and we meet 4 of those times in a venue in Suffolk. It's Hallow Tree Scout Campsite, which is a fantastic hall, and we hold demos. So it really is a situation where you come into the room and you could have between 4 and 6 demos there for the evening. And last year I made the conscious decision to introduce some more field weekends. We held a social, and that has now grown into several special event weekends, field weekends, and it's allowing clubs who normally would only meet once a month and have a coffee and a biscuit and a chat to fall in love with radio again. They're coming out with their rigs that they've not used for a while, and they're meeting the friends that they haven't necessarily seen. And they're doing that through the field weekends, and that's sort of filtering in through the actual evenings that we hold in the hall as well. So that enthusiasm is growing. It's definitely great.
Of course, the different thing is actually a collaboration of different clubs, is that right?
Yes. Originally, it was the brainchild of Steve Thomas M1ACB and Keith Gaunt G7CIY, and they recognised that there was a gap between people coming into the hobby as M6s, newly licensed, and an introduction to the diversity of amateur radio. There wasn't anything really serving that purpose. They found Essex Skills Nights, they went along to that, came back and said we need something like this in Suffolk. The difference between Skills Nights and Suffolk Red is we work directly with all the other clubs in the area by listening to the chairmans and the members. And we then feed that back to our table of 5 members. There's only 5 of us that put it on. And we say, right, well, this is what they're asking for, what can we put together? And from that, we come up with the format for the evening or the field weekend. And recently, this year, I actually got all of the chairmen from Suffolk together, and we had a very open discussion about what we need from the hobby and what's available, and the need is something like Suffolk Red to fill the gap where the clubs can't put the things on themselves. And that doesn't sound rude or disrespectful to anybody. That is a genuine feedback from the clubs, that Suffolk Red is needed to basically support them and support amateur radio growth in our region.
Okay, so the big question, is Suffolk Red making a difference?
It has, yes. We have had a lot of people come through the doors. We have anything between 45 on a bad night, and we've had 75 on a very good night. That was a very hot night in May, a lot of people in the room. And they're going away enthusiastic, and they're going away and they're dusting off kit that they've never used before, and they've been buying SDR, the digital side of things. We dedicated an entire Red just to digital, and I was getting a bit negative responses. Oh, I'm not digital, I'm all die-hard SSB, CW. And then they came along and they actually sort of went, FT8 isn't all that bad, and this is quite good what we can do with an Arduino and things like that. So it did change the perspective on some people, but also it gave others who'd read about the articles in Radcom, the big digital feature this year, an opportunity to see some of the kit working. And it really then sort of reinforced their love for the hobby and that bit of kit. So yes, it does make a difference, absolutely.
Excellent, more power to your elbow. What's next? First Suffolk, next the world.
No, not quite, not yet. Let's get our little Suffolk sorted out first, and then, well, partnerships and working together. I mean, we work together as chairmen, you as Essex Hams and me as Suffolk Red. We do a lot of skill sharing in that way as well, and linking in with other groups around Region 12 and other chairmen around Region 12. We move forward, onwards and upwards.
Excellent, Sarah, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and more power to your elbow.
Thank you.
And we'll be back at the RSGB Convention later with a preview of Yaesu's new transceiver and an update on amateur satellites with Graham Shirville.
Martin Lynch & Sons are always looking to bring you the latest innovations in ham radio. The Geochron Digital 4K displays a full-featured Geochron world clock on any 4K TV. plug it into your TV and have instant access to every map set and lighting option available in the famous mechanical clock, but at a fraction of the price. The visually stunning display gives you the exact time across the planet with sunrise and sunset rendered in real time, taking in the full terrestrial movement of the Earth's orbit in sync with the Sun. The size of the display is only limited by the size of your TV. We're also very excited to announce that we are exclusive distributors of the Spanish INAC range of loop antennas, available from only $379.95. With fast remote continuous tuning, these high selectivity antennas are like a filter in reception and transmission. Find out more about these small size, high performance antennas and the incredible Geochron Digital 4K at hamradio.co.uk. Martin Lynch & Sons, the world's favourite ham store.
And now, our free-to-enter draw. This post-Christmas bundle is up for grabs to the lucky person whose entry is pulled from the Shack hat. From the RSGB, we have 4 books to give away, including the RSGB Yearbook for 2019. And from Martin Lynch & Sons, the amazing new dual-band 5-watt handy from Yaesu. If you'd like this lot as a post-Christmas stocking filler, then see our website on how to enter and full terms and conditions. Good luck!
We have, of course, got a row of buttons along the bottom here. So the menu here offers us some of the more advanced modes or advanced settings. So, for example, going into particular settings of connectors, of notch filters, connectors for external things such as computers for digital decoding, how that's going to work, or the settings for remote control. So all those more advanced settings are accessible through that. We can also change the size of the display, the digital display at the top here, in relation to the waterfall by tapping on this, expand and set. So there we are, I've got smaller numbers and more waterfall, which makes it easier for me to see what signals we've got going on here. I particularly like on this, and actually on the 7300 it's very effective as well, and that is the noise reduction. When you've got a really high, crackly, staticky noise level, putting that noise reduction in really drops down the background noise, and that's all, of course, done in the DSP, and you've got a very effective noise blanker against pulsed noise as well. It's quite special to have a radio that goes from 10 kilohertz all the way up to 3 gigahertz. So what happens when we go to the VHF UHF section? Well, there we tend to want to do scanning. We do some manual tuning around, but what I've done is I've programmed in quite a lot of frequencies that I like to listen to. So if I switch to the memory, we can see first of all there's a button here that says group up and down, and what you can do is arrange your channel memories into groups and label them so that they mean something to you. So I've got one there that says PMR, which is the free to use 446 radios, marine, self-explanatory, 70 centimeters and 2, so I've got the frequencies in that I listen to there, or air band. And when you've preset all your frequencies, then it's very easy to scan. If I just hit scan there, I'm going to do a memory scan. So just look at the speed it's whizzing through all those channels and changing the modes and the filters according to what I put in the memory, because it will remember all those parameters. So if I want to add a channel, let's for example put in a satellite downlink. I have to decide which group it's going to be in first of all, so I'm going to choose one of my groups. I'm going to put it in my airband group for the minute because that's what I've got set up for demonstration purposes, but I expect we'd probably create a whole group called satellite and we'd put all those downlink frequencies in it. And then what I'm going to do is take it back into VFO mode, and then I'm going to put in the frequency I want. So we're going to be in FM, and I'm going to put in 145,960, and it's in FM. To add that as a memory, all I need to do is touch the memory write button, MW, and it gives me the option, and this is the great thing I liked about this radio when I was programming all my frequencies in, is it helps you not to screw it up, because it is asking me, do you want to write this to a new channel? Do you want to write it to the selected channel? or do you want to select the channel and write it? So I'll just, because I'm adding it on the end of my list, I'll just put write to a new channel, boff, and it is done. So it's put that frequency in and it's added it to the frequencies that I've got programmed in that group. And if I just press VM, takes us back into the memory, and then I can step through it, and there it is, been added on the end. So it's really easy to add your frequencies, and then you can name them as well, so you can give them tags that mean something when you see them. So some things you might want to label not just as a frequency, but you want to know what it actually is you're listening to, and you can arrange them all in the groups that you want, as I've said, and in total you've got some 2,000 memories, so that's quite a lot to play with. And as I said, the scan speed is pretty impressive. By the way, when you're scanning, you can decide what you want to scan by selecting either a group here. So if we select, if I just wanted to scan, for example, the marine channels, I've selected the marine group. So I was stepping up and down with group. That's my marine group of channels there. And then before I hit start, I'm going to press select. And with the main dial, I can switch between all or that group that I'd selected 3. So now if I hit start, it's just going to scan the marine channels that I programmed in, and it does it pretty darn quick. Or if I wanted to scan everything that I've put in my memories, then I can go select and just turn that to all and hit start. Now it's whizzing through the lot. Oops, found something already. So it's picked up a local repeater straight away. Now, another thing that's built in to this radio is digital decoding. Now, if we go, as you remember, we tap on the mode and it brings up all the various modes. We've got one here called digital, and if we tap on that, we get our first digital option, which is NXDN, or DCR, or D-Star, or P25, or DPMR. So really, I suppose if I were to say there was one thing I'd like to have been on there, would have been to easily hear DMR, but of course that's swearing a bit when you've got an Icom radio here, so obviously it does D-Star. But if you do want to decode other modes that aren't available here, remember from the back we had got those very useful outputs. So we've got an IF output, we've got audio outputs that we can all send out to an external processor and a computer or other decoder and decode other digital modes that way. So you've still got that flexibility. And also you'll see it's flashing between the two here, and that's because it would auto detect the way it is at the moment whether it was a digital signal or an FM signal, and it would behave accordingly. So here we are back in the 40-meter amateur band again. We're down the CW end just to explore other signals we might want to monitor with this fantastic radio. So let's listen to some CW first of all. We've got some strong CW signals coming in here. So that's great. But what about if we want to use other digital modes such as RTTY? Well, interestingly, you can decode RTTY on board by selecting FSK. Then you go into the menu and hit decode, and a little decode screen will turn up here. It would if we were tuned to an RTTY signal. Of course, it's not having a lot of success trying to decode CW. So what about other modes that we might want to decode? Well, how about going off to have a listen to some PSK? So if we go to 14070, now we can't decode that on board, I'm afraid, but what we can do, as we explained earlier on, is really easily connect this to an external computer because it's got a USB socket on the back. So what we did when we plugged in the antenna cables, we also connected the USB socket from here to our MacBook, and it just took about 9 seconds to set up. Literally went into FLDG and just selected this as the USB sound card, is what it came up on the list of audio inputs, and decoding away nicely there. Echo Alpha 3 Alpha Yankee Quebec is calling CQ on FLDigi. There we are then, quite a receiver, and I think we've only just scratched the surface today in this whistle-stop tour. There's so many other things that we could have gone on about for hours more. We could have shown you all the functions, so things like the fact that it'll do descrambling in DPMR mode as long as you know the encryption key, all the DCS and tone squelch, the fact that there's an SD card slot on the front here, so you can record audio, you can take shots of the screen, which you can share. You can also download the whole profile of the radio onto the SD card, so it's all set up how you love it. You could share that with somebody else. But I have to say, it was relatively easy and speedy to program the channels manually on the radio. Not like some, I think it would be fair to say, of the Chinese handhelds where really you don't want to do it like that. You'd only do it with a computer. So straightforward to use, tremendously versatile radio. And I think, and to be honest, it's reflected in the price, this is a very high-end radio. But I think at the price that it's positioned at, for the quality of general coverage receiver, and this is general coverage, 10 kilohertz to 3 gigs, in a box this size, the performance is amazing and it is a fantastic addition to any shack. If you are looking for a really versatile radio that covers the spectrum, then this is the radio for you. The IC-R6800. We've given you a brief test drive, and of course if you want to find out more about it, then if you go to our show notes at txfactor.co.uk, you'll find it all there.
Back at the RSGB Convention now, and we promised you a look at another exciting new radio. It's a Yaesu, but what model is this?
This is the new FTdx 101 MP/D SDR transceiver from Yaesu. It's not available yet, but it will be available towards the end of the year, early part of next year. It's Yaesu's introduction into the SDR marketplace. We're late to the market, but then we have learnt the lessons from some of the other manufacturers, and so we hope that this actually does everything there. One of the major differences, if that's what about this radio, is that it's what's called a hybrid SDR. A hybrid SDR, yes. So SDR is the signal comes in at the front end of the radio, goes into an A to D converter, and then is displayed one of them. A hybrid does that, but it also has like a conventional mixer with a down conversion. So this radio has both direct sampling and hybrid SDR, so it's got best of both worlds effectively. And what we've done is that we've used a direct sampling SDR receiver for the display. And there's a diagram in the manual, which we can check out, which shows that you come in through here, through the RF, through a A to D converter, an FPGA, and into the display. So the display you're looking at is a direct sampling SDR. So you get the dynamic range, so you get the strong signals and the weak ones, and that's what drives that. But at the same time, the signal goes through a mixer and a roofing filter into a A to D converter as a conventional SDR, like our analog FTdx 5000, and then through a DSP processor to the display. So we think it's got the best of both worlds. The MP is the 200 watt version, and then the D is the 100 watt version. It covers all HF bands, and the UK one will cover 4 meters as well. So that's a new introduction for us. All modes, it'll do 200 watts there, but of course we've a limitation of 100 watts in this country, so we'll have to work out that. But this is a prototype. We expect, as I said, it to be available in the early part of next year. And Yaesu's made a statement as well that we're not going down this road only. We're going to continue to market and manufacture the FTdx 5000, which is our flagship product. So there'll be 2 flagship products. Yaesu's got a strategy that says we'll do analog radio for those that like it, and we'll do SDR for those that like it. They both do the same sort of thing, and I don't think you'll hear one signal on one that you won't hear on the other. It might be slightly better on this one, but that's just technology. All the data modes and all that kind of stuff is all supported in exactly the same way. CAT connection in the back, and that's about it at the moment.
Very nice it is too, and we'll bring you a full review of the impressive FTdx 101 in a future episode of TX Factor. Finally, here's Pete again with an old friend of ours, Graham Shirville.
Well, at the RSGB Convention we've also got the AMSAT Colloquium. So the AMSAT stream is talking all about satellites. It's just an amazing time to be involved with satellites. This is actually our 33rd AMSAT-UK Colloquium, so we've been going along well.
And what's new with AMSAT at the moment?
Well, obviously we've got FunCube, a number of FunCubes already in orbit, but we're building, well, we've built 2 that are expected to be launched next month from a SpaceX flight from Vandenberg. One is called JY1sat, which is being funded and supported by the Jordanian ministry over there, and that's it's named in honor of King Hussein, whose call sign was JY1 back a long while ago, but was very active radio amateur. And also working with ASEO, working with ESA on their ASEO mission, which we first started working on in about 2005, and has finally, well, it hasn't reached the launch site yet, it's still at STEC, but we hope it will be transported before the end of this month in time for that launch. So that's just 2 more that we've got in the works.
And there's an interesting anniversary on the cards at the moment, I gather.
Yes, FunCube 1, which we launched coming up for 5 years ago, November, just next month, where you had a great party at the NRC, of course, where we monitored the launch, and that's been working fine for 5 years, providing a transponder for amateur radio amateurs and also STEM outreach for schools and colleges. It has a really strong signal, which is easy to receive with just a little dongle.
I was going to ask you about STEM. What sort of things can schools do when it comes to using the FunCube?
There's a lot of telemetry coming down and a lot of material science experiments which they can do with the telemetry. We have a lot of supporting documentation on the web, on our FunCube web page, and it's being picked up by colleges and schools not only here in the UK, but of course it's going around the world. So all over the world it's being used by schools and colleges for STEM, or we have to call it STEAM outreach now, apparently. They have added A, which stands for art.
I gather there's something on the cards that's going to maybe change the way things work for amateur radio satellite, is that right?
Yes, a Sail 2, that's what you're hearing about. We've talked about a Sail 2 for 3 or 4 years. It's a geostationary spacecraft. It's a standard broadcast satellite. It will be in the sky, not very far away from Astra, from the sky. If it all works, it will change the face of amateur radio as we know it. It will give us an ionosphere that is perfectly reliable. Well, 8.25 megs of an ionosphere that is perfectly reliable, doesn't change 24/7. We're going to have to learn how to use it carefully and safely and respect it. There are 2 transponders without going into too much detail. Again, I will say we're talking about that tomorrow at our colloquium. Again, that will be on YouTube, so there's a full description coming up on that. But yeah, it's almost handheld. We're not quite sure of the link budget, but it may be, you know, a block with a whip or a small patch antenna. You'll be able to work anybody basically in region 1, IARU region 1, plus a bit from Brazil over to Singapore, from the North Pole to the South Pole. That's really going to change everything. What's going to happen to IOTA or YOTA or SOTA or whatever when you can just put a small dish up and work all of that? Fantastic.
Anything else new to talk about with AMSAT?
Yes, lots, but we have some of these NDAs, so it is difficult to talk about some of it. We have NDAs and the Americans have ITAR, International Trade in Armaments Regulations, so we work around those restrictions.
Graham, I won't stop you. You clearly need to get back after your lunch break to the rest of the colloquium. Have a great time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Yes, that is just a glass of water, or at least so he tells us. Many thanks to all our contributors in this episode. Full show notes and all our past episodes are available at the TX Factor website. And we'd love to hear from you, so do get in touch. Until the next time then, thanks for watching. Cheerio. TX Factor is brought to you in association with Martin Lynch & Sons, the world's favourite ham store. And the Radio Society of Great Britain is proud to sponsor TX Factor.